Hello, everybody. Hope we're all doing good today. I am exhausted, but I am ready to record this. I've been trying to get this one together for a little bit now. Um, it won't be a full story today, but rather a collection of true crime news or recent updates that maybe we may have missed. The only update in my life right now is that I just finished a 2,000-piece puzzle after a month and a half of world landmarks, most of which I didn't recognize, but it was fun. Anyways, let's get into it. The sources for my story today came from NBCConnecticut.com, an article by Devika Rawar at republicworld.com, an article from The Guardian, and then Rick Gervais USA Today article. And I'll list all of the full list in the show notes as well. So I just kind of wanted to give this format a go, rather than typing literally every single word out of the story I want to tell you, and rather have more of a bullet point or a PowerPoint sort of conversation today. Hopefully less just reading and maybe more, like I said, conversational. With that being said, there has been a lot of movement in cases over the past few months. Most notably, you've heard of the University of Idaho murders. But to be completely honest, this case is still so heartbreaking and fresh in a lot of people's minds. And it's just been talked about to Earth's end, honestly, already. And I'm not entirely comfortable speaking on that case just yet. So we're going to move past that. You can find plenty of information from 1,000 different sources. Anyways, these other cases that I do want to spend some time on, they've had more time to digest, only with newer developments coming recently this year or in 2022 as well. The first being Juan David Ortiz. This piece of work, he was a real scumbag. If you really want to know everything he did, I did do a full episode on him a few weeks ago, and I meant to do an update following that episode right away. Didn't get to it, hence why we're doing it right now. But essentially, back in 2018, Juan David Ortiz, he went on a spree killing. He ended up murdering 4 women, all who met him under the guise of looking for sex work, when in reality, Joe Dirtbag over here, he hated sex workers with an absolute passion. And one day he finally acted on that hate. He just snapped. Well, I shouldn't say he just snapped, but he murdered a woman. And then over the course of a few days, he continued to murder 3 more. And there would have been more victims too, except for the last woman he had picked up. She ended up escaping before he could kill her too, which is amazing for her and for anybody else that got away that day. So after his arrest for over 4 years, from 2018 to 2022, there were more than a dozen pretrial hearings, motions, and then not to mention the pandemic, which literally slowed everything down. Many cases were bumped years, months back. But finally, at the end of November of 2022, the trial had commenced. And after 4 years, like I said, of pretrial, nothing crazy came of the actual trial, although the jury only took 5 hours to find him guilty, which is always quite satisfying. So Ortiz was emotionless, as one would expect. Judge Oscar Hale sentenced him to life without parole. So he is gone for good, thankfully. The death sentence was taken off the table, but he will not have a chance of ever getting out. Thank God. Okay. All right. Moving on. Excuse me. Let me readjust here. I am laying in bed today. I'm feeling much better than the last episode I recorded. If you heard, I was quite sick, but we're still recovering. Okay. Next up, a much more recent conviction. Peter Manfredonia. Another real poop shoot of a person. So, in all honesty, I had never even heard of him before or his case, which is quite surprising because it's a doozy, to be honest. So let me take you back to the very, very beginning of the pandemic. On May 22nd of 2020, Peter was allegedly on, this is according to him, day 5 of no sleep, and he claims that he suddenly snapped. This quote-unquote snap resulted in him attacking 2 men with a samurai sword. A fucking samurai sword. One man, so these 2 men were found in the street. Not sure how they got there after the attack or if they were attacked in the street. But one man died on the way to the hospital, and fortunately, the other gentleman survived the attack. So, following this insanity, Manfredonia broke into a 74-year-old man's house and tied him up at gunpoint. So, over a period of 24 hours, the victim, who I couldn't find a name for him, maybe he wanted to remain anonymous, don't blame him, but essentially, they were just talking, right? He was tied up, and Peter put the news on, and after a while, the victim became aware that Peter was on the run for the um, attack, the samurai attack hours earlier. Um, so things started to get a little bit more tense, but apparently this is where Peter had told the victim he was remorseful, quote, and that he had snapped due to the 5 days of no sleep. And after I assume the worst day of his life, Peter luckily fled in the man's truck, leaving him unharmed at the scene. Still tied up though, but he didn't hurt him. Now, things start to heat up again. Attack, let a man live, and now we're going to see another attack. Peter went to his old friend Nicholas Eisel's apartment. I'm not really sure what ensued, but he proceeded to fatally shoot Nicholas and then kidnapped his girlfriend, who was also there at the time. And he held this woman hostage for 7 hours. But yet again, in a weird twist, he let her go unharmed, but utterly traumatized. I wrote this down. I was supposed to put it a few paragraphs ago, but this was all taking place while Peter was attending the University of Connecticut as a student. So he was still quite young. Anyways, after this, the final attack and kidnapping and release, the hunt was on. Police had finally captured Peter Manfredonia on May 27th, 5 days later, in Maryland. So now we come back to the present, February 2023. Here we are today. Now he's 26 years old, and on February 8th of last week, what day is it? 2 weeks ago, Peter had entered a guilty plea on charges of murder, first-degree assault, and home invasion. And his sentencing will take place next month on April 20th. So yeah, exactly 1 month from today. And apparently he only faces up to 55 years in prison, which kind of surprises me. Maybe since he did enter a guilty plea, he got a nice little deal out of that. But here's to him getting all 55. So that's the second update I have for you. And I kind of want to change gears a little bit here for a minute. Rather than convictions, I want to talk about this article I recently found. and it's about a release rather than somebody going to prison. So raise your hand if you've ever heard of Michael Jordan. A few of you guys? Cool. So, anyways, if you aren't keen to the sports scene, his father, James Jordan, was killed, murdered, shot to death in his car in July of 1993. And in the wake of this tragedy, um, Larry DeMary, wow, I think that's wrong. Demery? It can't be Larry DeMary. Larry Demery and Daniel Green, who were both 18 at the time, were convicted in 1996 for the crime. Both were sentenced to life, but due to an error in Larry DeMary's trial, he was actually resentenced in 2008, and this resentencing now allowed him to apply for a parole program, which subsequently he was approved for. According to North Carolina newspapers, Larry DeMary will be released on this parole program on August 6th of 2023. And I think it is a work program, or a work school program. So I don't know. He was 18 at the time. He was approved for the parole program. I don't think I'm going to speak anything more on that. But an update for North Carolinians. People serving life are no longer eligible for parole in North Carolina with new and updated laws. But since Larry had been convicted years before this change, he was essentially grandfathered in to the option. So that's why he's still qualified for it. All right, so someone's getting out who maybe shouldn't, maybe should, who knows? But on the other hand, somebody is getting out that truly, truly deserves to be free. A man from Missouri, and I, a lot of you have probably heard about this one. I think it made pretty big news. But a man from Missouri has been freed after his conviction was overturned 28 years later. 28 years. Lamar Johnson, so almost 3 decades ago, was wrongfully accused and convicted of killing Marcus Boyd, who was shot to death on his porch in October of 1994. Lamar has always maintained his innocence, along with his then girlfriend, who had testified that they were together at the time of the crime, that they were not there. They were together in a separate area. It didn't matter. However, I don't really want to get into it. It's super frustrating, but he was sentenced, and he ended up spending almost 30 years in prison. But two key things have happened relatively recently for this conviction to be overturned. One, James Howard, a man. So this guy was serving life for a different murder. And then he recently testified that he and another had killed Marcus and that Lamar Johnson was never there. So this new piece of evidence comes out. And let's make a note here that years ago, James Howard and the other man that were involved both signed affidavits claiming that Johnson was not involved. But apparently nobody took notice back then, not until he recently retestified this same information. Number two, a second man, Jay Elking, who had been with Marcus when he had died, he had recanted his testimony. So this man was on the porch with Boyd while he was shot, right? Elking initially told investigators that he was not able to identify the shooter, but he claimed police very, very much urged him at least to view a lineup. And then they continued to urge and push Elking to, quote, choose one, which I can definitely see that happening. And unfortunately, Elking felt compelled to do so, and Lamar Johnson happened to be the guy that he had pointed to. Elking also later admitted to being paid roughly $4,000 to testify, with this forced identification, you could call it, I guess. Jay Elking also claims that this decision has been haunting him for years, which I kind of hope so. I feel bad that he was coerced into doing that. I'm glad that he's recanted his confession or his testimony, but damn, that took a while. So attorney Kim Gardner, along with help from the Innocence Project, took all of this new information that I've shared with you, and they filed for Lamar's release. I think this happened, August of 2022, but don't quote me on that. And up until now, the state had been denying any appeal for Lamar Johnson. In fact, quote, the Republic-led state attorney general's office fought to keep Johnson locked up, end quote. And then I have another piece here. Johnson's attorneys, they said they blasted the office after the hearing, saying it, quote, never stopped claiming Lamar was guilty and were comfortable to have him die in prison, end quote. Which is true, I believe, and absolutely fucked. They were sitting on not all this information, but at least some of it for years, and they chose to do absolutely nothing about it and let this innocent man rot in prison. But luckily, as terrible as Missouri State Attorney's office is, this is a huge victory, and I'm super happy for Lamar and his daughters after 28 years of, I can only imagine, hell. So, among everything terrible, there are great people doing wonderful things out there, and I like to just shine a light on that a little bit. So I figured that was an uplifting update to end on. I hope you enjoyed that. If you didn't, please let me know, and I'll never do it again. Okay, bye-bye now.